What is a skill that takes less than an hour to learn, but makes you look like an absolute genius to others? Story 1. Basic Excel functions. VLOOKUP, XLOOKUP, and pivot table. Okay, so I have to tell you about my cubicle neighbor Derek, because I still think about this at least once a month. Derek and I sat next to each other for like 2 years at this logistics company, and for most of that time he was just Derek. Nice guy, brought donuts on Fridays, nothing special skill-wise. Then one Tuesday our team lead dumps this absolute monster of a spreadsheet on us, like 11,000 rows of shipment data, and says she needs a summary broken down by region and carrier by end of day. I watched 3 people just start scrolling and manually copying numbers into a notepad like cavemen. I was one of them, not gonna lie. We're talking sticky notes, calculator app open on the phone, the whole tragic scene. And then Derek just goes, "Give me 20 minutes, and puts his headphones on. 20 minutes later, he swivels his monitor around, and there's this beautiful little pivot table, totals by region, totals by carrier, a drop-down filter and everything. Our team lead's jaw actually dropped. She asked him where he learned that, and he said, and I quote, "Some guy on YouTube took me like 15 minutes on my lunch break last week." 15 minutes. The man watched a video while eating a sandwich, and now he's basically our department's data wizard. After that, it snowballed fast. People started saving him a seat. He got pulled into meetings just to make it look nice in Excel. He casually dropped an XLOOKUP into a report a month later, and one of the older guys, Frank, who'd been doing manual VLOOKUP adjacent nonsense with nested if statements for 15 years, just stared at his screen in silence for a solid 10 seconds. I thought Frank was going to have a small crisis right there at his desk. The thing that gets me is Derek never acted like it was a big deal. He'd just shrug and say, "It's literally one function, I don't get why nobody else looks it up." Which fair, but also, my guy, you have no idea what kind of leverage you're sitting on. He started getting asked to just clean up other people's reports before they went to the director, which is a nice way of saying he became the unofficial data guy without a raise, but hey, reputation's reputation. I finally sat down and watched a tutorial myself after watching this unfold for the 3rd time. Genuinely took less time than my coffee break. VLOOKUP, then XLOOKUP because apparently it's the better version now, then a basic pivot table. I'm never going to be Derek level, but the next time someone handed me a messy dataset, I didn't want to cry, I just built a table and had numbers in about 4 minutes. My manager actually said, "Oh nice," out loud, which from her is basically a standing ovation. Here's my honest take on the whole thing. I think it says a lot about how low the bar is in most offices, not necessarily how high Derek's skill ceiling is. Most people just never bothered to spend 15 minutes learning the one tool they use every single day. It's not that Excel is hard, it's that nobody treats learning your own software as a real task worth blocking time for. Once you do, you look like a genius purely by contrast. Kind of a sad commentary on office culture if you think about it too long, but also, hey, free reputation boost, I'll take it. Anyway, that's Derek's origin story. Reminds me actually of my uncle, who pulled off something similar but with an actual physical vehicle instead of a spreadsheet, and honestly, it might be an even better story than this one. Stick around for that. Story 2. Backing a trailer trick. So my Uncle Rich bought this little camper trailer a few summers ago, completely on impulse. No plan, no experience towing anything in his life. First time we went camping with it, I swear it took him 25 minutes and about 6 near misses just to back it into the campsite spot. There was yelling. There was a small crowd of other campers pretending not to watch but absolutely watching. My aunt eventually just got out of the truck and stood off to the side with her arms crossed, which is her signal for "I am done being part of this." Fast forward about a year, we go on another trip, different campground. And this time there's this narrow gravel spot between 2 other rigs, barely more room than the trailer itself. I'm bracing for round 2 of the family circus. Instead, Rich just calmly backs the whole thing in. First try, smooth as anything, like he's been doing it his whole life. I actually said out loud, "Who are you and what did you do with Rich?" Turns out over the winter he'd watched some short video, maybe 5 minutes long, he told me later, about this trick where you put your hand at the bottom of the steering wheel, like 6 o'clock position, and whichever way you move your hand, that's the direction the trailer end swings. Apparently, your brain naturally wants to steer like you're driving forward, which is exactly backwards from what you need to do with a trailer, and that's why everyone, including Rich, was struggling so badly before. But flip your mental model with that one hand position trick and suddenly it just clicks. He said he practiced for maybe 20 minutes total in an empty parking lot near his house before that trip. Some cones, a lot of muttering to himself, and that was it. 20 minutes and one YouTube video undid an entire year of him being the guy who caused traffic jams at campgrounds. What really got me was watching other campers react. A guy from the site next to ours actually walked over afterward and asked Rich straight up, "Man, how long have you been towing trailers?" Rich, completely deadpan, says, "Oh, years." I nearly choked. My aunt heard that and just shook her head and went back to unpacking the cooler, but I could tell she was proud of him too, even if she wasn't going to say it in front of the neighbor. Now he's the designated backer-inner for the whole extended family whenever anyone needs a trailer parked somewhere tight. Cousins call him for advice. He gives them the hand trick, and half of them still can't do it because apparently there's something about actually being behind the wheel with the pressure on that trips people up even when they know the theory. My take on this one is that it's less about the trick itself and more about how much of towing anxiety is really just a broken mental model, not actual difficulty. The mechanics haven't changed. The trailer still does the same thing it always did. All that changed is Rich finally had a framework that matched how his brain needed to think about it. Once the confusion clears, the skill turns out to be almost embarrassingly simple. It's kind of humbling, honestly, how much of looking incompetent is really just not having the right 5-minute explanation yet. Speaking of 5-minute explanations that make people look like wizards, my old roommate did something similar with a laptop, no cones or trailers involved, just some keys and a screenshot, and honestly the reaction he got was almost funnier. That one's coming up next. Story 3. Keyboard shortcuts. My old roommate Min was, and honestly still is, one of the most unbothered people I've ever lived with. Nothing fazed the guy, except for one time, weirdly, it was me that caused it, and it involved nothing more than a keyboard. We were splitting an apartment in college, both broke, both juggling part-time jobs and classes, and one night he was scrambling to finish an assignment with like an hour left before it was due. Classic him. He accidentally closed a browser tab with a bunch of research open, and I watched him go through the actual 5 stages of grief in real time. Denial, then a very loud swear word, then him frantically trying to type the website names back into the search bar from memory. I just leaned over from the couch and hit Ctrl plus Shift plus T on his laptop. The tab popped right back, exactly where it was, scroll position and everything. He turned and looked at me like I'd just performed actual sorcery. "How did you do that?" I told him it reopens the last closed tab, works for basically every browser, and you can hit it multiple times to bring back several tabs in a row. He made me repeat it 3 times so he wouldn't forget. After that, he started asking me for shortcuts constantly, like I was suddenly the household tech oracle, just because I knew one keyboard combo. I showed him Windows plus Shift plus S for quick screenshots, since he was always fumbling around trying to use his phone to take pictures of his own screen, which, in hindsight, is a genuinely painful thing to witness someone do. I showed him Ctrl plus Z, obviously, but also Alt plus Tab held down to actually see all his open windows instead of clicking through the taskbar one by one like some kind of digital caveman. Within like a week, he was zipping around his laptop without touching the trackpad hardly at all, and it was honestly a little unsettling how fast the transformation happened. Our other roommate, Jay, who is way more tech-savvy than either of us normally, actually asked Min where he learned all that, clearly assuming Min had taken some kind of course. Min just said, "Oh, picked it up," completely leaving me out of the story. The absolute traitor. I let it slide because it was genuinely funny watching him strut around like a keyboard ninja. The thing is, none of what I showed him took more than a couple minutes each to learn, and he probably spent a total of maybe 20 minutes across that whole week actually practicing and looking a few more up on his own once he got the taste for it. But the impression it left was completely disproportionate to the effort. People just don't expect fluency with a tool they use every single day, so the second you show even a little of it, it reads as expertise. My honest opinion here is that keyboard shortcuts are probably the single best ratio of effort to wow reaction that exists in modern life. You're not learning anything conceptually hard, you're just memorizing a couple of finger positions, and yet somehow it makes people look like they have their entire digital life figured out. Min definitely did not have his entire life figured out. Man was still doing laundry with 0 detergent measurement skills that same semester. But on a keyboard, sure, total genius. Speaking of things that look like genius but are really just memorized tricks, I've got a buddy from college who can tell you what day of the week any date in history fell on, completely in his head. And that one honestly still messes with me more than the tab trick ever did. Story 4. Conway's Doomsday Algorithm. My friend Tuan from college has this party trick that I still cannot fully wrap my head around, even though he's explained the mechanics to me twice. He can tell you, almost instantly, what day of the week any date fell on or will fall on, past or future. No calendar, no phone, nothing. First time I saw him do it, we were at a mutual friend's birthday dinner, and someone jokingly asked, "Hey Tuan, what day of the week is Christmas gonna be this year?" Not really expecting an actual answer. More just small talk. Tuan paused for like 2 seconds, said Friday, and then just went back to eating like nothing happened. Someone at the table pulled out their phone to check, and yeah, dead on. The table lost it. People started throwing random dates at him like it was a game show. Someone's birthday in some random year, the date World War II ended, some historical event nobody even fully remembered the year of off the top of their head, and Tuan just kept nailing it, occasionally pausing a beat longer for the trickier ones, but never actually wrong. By the end of dinner, people were calling him the human calendar, and one guy legitimately asked if he was some kind of savant, like it was a diagnosed thing. I cornered him afterward because I needed to know if this was some secret lifelong obsession I never knew about. Turns out no. He'd learned it maybe 2 months prior from some video explaining something called the Doomsday Algorithm, where basically every year has a specific anchor day, a day of the week, that a handful of easy-to-remember dates always fall on, like the last day of February or April 4th or the 4th of July, adjusted a certain way. Once you memorize the anchor day pattern and a bit of quick math for the century and year, you can work out any date pretty fast in your head. He said it took him about half an hour of actual focused practice, mostly just drilling random dates against a calendar until the calculation got fast enough to not look like he was visibly struggling. What I found funniest is that he almost didn't bother learning it because the video made it look kind of dry and mathematical, just a bunch of formulas and modular arithmetic. But he was bored one night and figured why not. And now it's basically become his whole identity at social gatherings. He's been asked to do it at like 4 different parties since. He told me once that a coworker straight up asked if he could read minds a little bit too, as a joke, but Tuan said the guy asked it in a tone like he wasn't fully joking. Here's what I actually think about the whole thing. It's a perfect example of how impressive something looks has almost nothing to do with how hard it actually is, and everything to do with how rare it is for people to have ever tried. Nobody thinks day-of-week math is impossible. They just never had a reason to sit down and learn the shortcut. So when someone does it fluently, it reads as borderline supernatural. Tuan basically bought himself permanent smartest guy at the party status for the price of 30 minutes on a slow Tuesday night. And honestly, that's one of the best trades I've ever seen anyone make. Speaking of things that make you look like you belong in a heist movie with barely any actual practice, my neighbor picked up something even more dramatic looking than mental math, and it involves an actual lock and a couple of thin metal picks. Story 5. Basic lock. Picking. My neighbor Alex is one of those guys who's always got some random new hobby going, so honestly I didn't think much of it when I noticed a little zippered case sitting on his porch table one weekend with what looked like tiny screwdrivers sticking out of it. Turned out it was a cheap lock-picking practice kit, one of those clear practice locks you can buy online for like $15, so you can actually watch the pins move around inside while you work the pick and tension wrench. I only found out because I locked myself out of my own place that same week, which, embarrassing timing, and I went over to ask if he had a spare ladder or something so I could try the back window. He just laughed and said, "Why would you need a ladder? Give me a second," grabbed his kit, walked over to my front door, and had it open in under 2 minutes. I stood there genuinely stunned. This was my actual front door, my actual deadbolt, not some toy practice lock, and he just casually popped it open like he was undoing a shoelace. I asked him how long he'd been doing this like it was some deep long-term skill, half expecting him to say he used to work security or something. He said, completely straight-faced, "About 40 minutes total, spread across like 3 nights this week." I did not believe him at first. He showed me a video on his phone that explains the basic idea, how a standard pin tumbler lock has a row of spring-loaded pins that all need to be pushed to a specific height at the same time for the lock to turn, and how with a tension wrench holding slight rotational pressure and a pick applying pressure pin by pin, you can feel each one set into place one at a time instead of needing the actual key. He said the clear practice lock was the real trick because you could literally watch it happening instead of guessing blind. After that, he wouldn't stop showing off. He picked the lock on his shed. He picked a padlock his sister left with him for safekeeping just because he was bored, and then had to sheepishly admit to her that he'd opened it without the combination when she asked for it back. She was half annoyed, half impressed, which felt like the appropriate reaction, honestly. Other neighbors on our street heard about it through the grapevine, and now there's apparently a small, unofficial waiting list of people who want him to look at their sticky old locks before they call an actual locksmith. What gets me is how much this skill leans into people's imagination about it. Movies make lockpicking look like some elite spy-level ability that takes years of secretive training, so when a regular guy in gym shorts does it on your actual front door in under 2 minutes, it hits completely different than watching someone be fast at a spreadsheet. There's a little bit of, should I be worried you know how to do this, mixed in with the impressed reaction, which honestly makes it even more fun to watch play out on people's faces. My honest take is that this one earns its genius reputation a little more than some of the others, purely because of the psychological weight locks carry for people, even though mechanically it's still a very learnable skill in under an hour with the right cheap practice tool. It's less about raw difficulty, and more about how rarely anyone ever gets to see the inside of a lock actually working. So once you show them, the mystery collapses, and the wow factor goes through the roof. 40 minutes well spent, honestly, even if my sister-in-law now double-checks her padlock every time Alex is over.